Hello, everybody. It is your buddy Tommy D, Tommy DeMisa, coming at you from the attic. I think it's 74 days we've been up in the attic now. Um, I was thinking about not saying from the attic anymore, but it's been a lot of fun and people are laughing about it. So I figured I just saw Amanda just smirk when I said it. So I will keep saying it. That was it. You answered that first question right out of the gate. So philanthropy and focus is really just this series of conversations I'm having with executive leadership of nonprofits. Oftentimes, it's the ED or the CEO. In other occasions, it could be the founder and executive director. So today, I have the opportunity to have one of my friends, Amanda Talty, from Tourette Association of America, come visit me in the attic. And before I even let you say hello, I'm just going to read some quick stats. Graduate of Hofstra with a BA in Communications and Sociology, then graduated from Baruch with master's in public administration, 2 years at the New York Botanical Gardens as director of individual giving, 3 years at Queens College, director of the annual fund, and then another 3 years at Vaughan College of Aeronautics in the associate VP of institutional advancement role. A lot of nonprofit work here, Amanda, up until you had a senior major gifts officer role at the American Red Cross, and then the last 4 years where you've been serving in a couple of different roles at the Tourette Association of America. Excited to have you on. Just so happy you visited here in the attic. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
I am outside, so as I mentioned, no guarantees that it'll be quiet. You may hear a lot of birds chirping, so I hope you'll bear with me.
Listen, I would love to hear some birds chirping. I just told you I'm stuck in an attic, so birds chirping would be nice. No, and all kidding aside, everybody, I just closed the window because I live very close to the Long Island Railroad station here, which if you live on Long Island, I've learned you always live close to a Long Island Railroad station, really no matter what town you're in. So listen, happy to have you with me. I really want to go through kind of the story of Amanda and what drew you to the nonprofit sector. I think, you know, all of us who have any connection to nonprofits, there's some story there. There's maybe something from a service perspective. You know, some families were service oriented. Maybe it's just something that happened in someone's life. I'm curious, was there sort of some kind of origin story that drew you to the nonprofit sector?
I mean, I think that, the short answer is yes, but not in the way people might think. I don't know how many people, when they're in college, or when they're young and are thinking like, what do I want to do when I grow up? Thought like, hey, I want to be a fundraiser, or hey, I want to be a program officer at a nonprofit, right? My sort of driving force was, there is a history of mental health issues in my family. My mother is diagnosed bipolar. So when I was growing up, my goal was always, I wanted to go in a helping field. And that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. For a short time, I thought I might go into social work, and then I thought I might become a psychiatric nurse. And, I think the thing that finally pushed me into the nonprofit field is I was doing direct care work at Zucker Hillside Hospital's Adolescent Pavilion. So that's a psychiatric hospital on the border of Queens and Long Island. And I was doing direct care work, and I was floated to an adult unit. I was working with teenagers, which I loved. It was great work. And then I was floated to an adult unit one night, and long story short, had a patient, physically assault me. Wasn't, and the truth is it wasn't even his fault, which is, like after the fact, when people asked me about it, I said, well, this was a 19-year-old young man who had been admitted to a psychiatric hospital, wasn't medicated. Unfortunately, the nurses on the unit failed to give me some pertinent details about him that maybe would have put me a little bit more on guard at the time. But, when I wasn't seriously injured in any way, I had some bruises, I had to go to the hospital for a night, but in all reality, I walked away unscathed for the most part. And all I could think about was, here was this young man who, I mean, he didn't even know what he was doing. There's something chemical in his brain that, made him think that I was going to shoot him with a gun that I didn't have. So what do you do with that? How do you help people like that, right? So when I left there shortly thereafter, mainly because I thought, well, I don't really want this to happen to me again. And maybe it's time I use my college education in a different way. So that's how I found myself working at a nonprofit that was specific towards researching and providing funding to, physicians, clinical and researchers throughout the country to explore the causes and potential treatments for mental illness. So that organization is still around today. So at the time it was called NARSAD. It's now the Brain and Behavior Research Foundation, and they really do incredible work. But that was really how I got my first start in the nonprofit world. And then, from there, what really guided me was, where could I be helpful, right? Where could I be helpful? I joke, if there was a zombie apocalypse, right? I have no tangible skills, right? I'm not a soldier. I'm not a physician. I'm not a nurse. What are my tangible skills that if there was a zombie apocalypse, I could be useful? And the reality is that I think, the skills that I really have are problem solving, and that's always really what drove me. How can I use my ability to see something that's not working, evaluate it, and make a plan on how you can course correct. That's my skill set. That's what I do best. So I don't know how tangible that is, but it's the thing I've got going for me. So I use that in my career, and that's really how I kind of guided some of my decisions, not all of my decisions. Some of my decisions to move around the nonprofit was to get exposed to different areas of the nonprofit world, sort of round myself out. But it was really always in roles where there was, at least on the front end, the understanding that there was a growth mindset, and that the position that I was in, I was charged to ensure that that growth happened. And that's really what's kept me in the field, and what eventually led me to be at the TAA. In addition to my personal connections to, having a family that needs support, that it can't always find, that it can't always get, and sort of knowing what that can feel like to be in a time of crisis with a loved one and not really know where to turn. The other thing was really, it was an organization that I thought needed me, needed my skills to keep it alive and keep it thriving for the long term. And that's really what I've been trying to do there for the last 4 years.
Well, I looked at my notes a couple of times while you were speaking, and I didn't see zombie apocalypse anywhere on my notes. So I was curious if I brought that up or if you brought it up. But and then because of my ego sometimes gets in the way, I did a little self-analysis and going, man, what value would I add in a zombie apocalypse? And this show is not about me, so I'll have to work on that later on, and maybe I'll post a video for everybody and tell you what Tommy D could do in a zombie apocalypse. But I would say this: one of my first calls would be to you and say, listen, man, listen, I would say, because you said, we see there's something needed and we have to evaluate, and you're a problem solver. I would say we have a problem and we need a solution. There's zombies all over the house and we need help. Look, in all honesty, I believe that we're all drawn to the service sector because of things that we have experienced in our lives. And I even know from my own personal side of things, I think the thing that changed me was when we started to have a family here. My wife and I have 4 children. I started to realize what we're really here for is really to help other people, like, period. Like, and it's awesome if you can create some sort of income stream out of doing that and raise your family and, enjoy a successful life by making an impact and helping other people. And I'm always struck by direct care workers in the nonprofit sector because in that example at Zucker, you were on the front lines. And in retrospect, you say you almost, not your words, but it was like it wasn't that big a deal. You kind of walked it off. You had some bruises, but you continued to do the job. And I'm always taken by the fact people in the nonprofit sector who are on the front lines and often dealing with people, whether it be in the mental health space or the IDD, intellectually developmentally disabled space, people they're in a tough spot sometimes, but they're doing it because they want to serve. So I'm always appreciative of that. And I think that's critical to point out, that it takes special people to be in those roles. And I don't take that lightly. And I applaud all the folks out there who are doing that great work on the front lines every day. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about, when I look back at the roles you've been in, for the most part, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they've been development type opportunities. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you look sitting here today as the CEO of the Tourette Association of America, did you look at, I want to be in an executive role running an organization? And also, were you targeting that really? And also, were you always looking around to see all the angles so you could graduate towards this type of opportunity? If you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think the short answer is I get bored real easy. I like to challenge myself professionally. And I also have, a fairly hefty, dose of not liking authority too much.
I hear that.
You combine those two things, and I think I always just, I don't know that I ever saw myself as a CEO per se, but I always, I always was working towards a position where I could have autonomy over my work, and I could really direct my work in the way I thought I would get the best results. And I think, throughout my career, certainly not at all my jobs, and in some cases, I had that for a little bit, and then change of, leadership changed my ability to do that. But I think, that was always for me a really big part of why I made moves. And again, that goes back to, I always looked for roles that I at least understood on the front end. The goal was for me to be successful. The goal was for me to grow the organization in whatever my little piece of the world was. That was my goal. That's what they wanted me to do. And that's usually what attracted me to those positions. Now, not in every case did it turn out that way. But that was what I was always really looking for. And, that I think is important to me. And it plays into how I manage my team, right? I don't think, people don't like to be micromanaged, right? And if you want quality people, right, quality people really don't like to be micromanaged.
Mm-hmm.
They really do want to feel like they have ownership on their work, and that they're being entrusted to do their job. They need oversight, like nobody's an island. I'm not an island.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, if you are dealing with somebody who is smart, who's in the job for the right reasons, wants to always be moving forward, why not let them off the leash? Let them go. Let them do what they think they know how to do best. And then just check in on them and make sure that they're still, in line with the larger vision. But why hold them back? So I think throughout my career and my different roles, that's the question I always had for people that I reported to. Why would you hold anybody back from doing their job? Let them flourish. Let them talk to anybody they want to talk to, as long as their end game is to do something better and bigger for the organization. Great leaders don't know everything. They don't do every job. They surround themselves with good people. So that's just, so in my career, that's really that's really how I've just always innately felt. And I sought out opportunities where, I thought that that would be the way it worked. Um, and then, eventually I found myself at the TAA, and it's really been, a wonderful experience being with the organization. I was really able to do that. And through that sort of freedom and through the autonomy that I was given by my predecessor to, work alongside him in looking at the organization and really building the organization, when he left, it was really easy for me to already know where I wanted to go with the organization and just sort of like step into the role and take it from there.
So would you say, I have probably about 15 new questions, but let's just start with one. Would you say that, in that relationship with your predecessor,
Mm-hmm.
that you were sort of being groomed to take on this role? Did that come early on in that relationship? I know you had an existing
I don't know.
relationship.
I think you'd have to ask him. I think my vantage point on it was, we had worked together previously. He understood that I was good at what I had done at that organization previously, which was fundraising. Whether or not he knew my skill set would translate well to the CEO role, years after he brought me to the TAA and, years after we had worked together at another place. That I don't really know. I think that's a question for him, but, I do like to think, that we were, that he was the leader and I was loyal to his leadership, and he was open in a very honest way to my feedback, even when he didn't agree with me. And I think for that, I have respect for him. And I think that his willingness to listen to me, even when he didn't want to, did set me up well to kind of seamlessly move into the role when he decided to move on.
Well, again, that to me sounds like an incredible leader in just that respect, to understand. And again, isn't that our life though, interacting with people and learning from people, and there's a mentorship, I think, in a lot of different ways, and maybe that was part of that scenario there. How when you leave the office, let's just say in theory it was a Friday afternoon and you come back that following Monday, so you leave as the director of development, probably a more fancy title than that, and then you become, that means I have to take my vitamins later. And then you become the CEO that following Monday. What is that transition? You turn around and you go, oh, it's me now. I'm it. Like, can you talk about that? Because a lot of the folks that listen to this show are in all a variety of roles inside of organizations, and some have the ambition to grow into a role like you're in right now. So maybe you can talk about that, how that transition went for you.
Yeah, for me, it was very energizing, I have to say. I had been with the organization for 2 years, and while the organization did change and was doing better, there were, in my mind, through my lens, there were clear gaps in the organization that needed to be tended to, and they just weren't getting tended to. So for me, it was very energizing to be able to come in and say to the staff, okay, great, here we are, and here's what I'm seeing. Here are all of the things that I think we need to start focusing on. Here are all the things that I think, we've been largely ignoring. And here are the things that I think we need to change. What do you all think? Right?
Mm-hmm.
That was a really, I think, energizing moment, not just for myself, but also for the staff, to really say to everybody, are you seeing what I'm seeing? And if you do see what I see, help me figure out the path to fix it or to make it better. So I think it was an energizing moment, and I think it allowed my organization to really refocus itself on what was important. I think over the years, it's done a tremendous amount of work, but I don't know that it's ever been truly programmatically focused. It did a little bit of this, it did a little bit of that, it did a little here, it did a little there. And for for a chunk of time, it wasn't as mission focused as maybe it should have been. Not because the people in charge didn't want to do good work or didn't care, but just because I think sometimes okay is okay. And I think the organization was at a point where, okay was okay. And my predecessor did what he could to really change the mindset, certainly hired a lot of good people, including myself. But once he moved on, that really gave me the opportunity to wrap my hands around all the things that maybe were not a focus for those before me. And it's been a lot of fun ever since. Not to say that
It sounds like it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, not to say that we've done everything perfectly, but we've certainly made a lot of changes that I think have improved the organization's ability to deliver services to those who need it.
So, first of all, that's an exciting story because it talks about that transition, and there's always opportunities for improvement, right? Nothing is ever fully baked, whether it be a business or an organization, a nonprofit for that matter. I apologize to you and anybody else listening because there's some construction going on outside. So this is the glory and glitz of doing our shows from home. But as I've said on other shows, Jimmy Fallon's doing the Tonight Show from the house, or at least he was earlier on. So I guess I'm in good company. So, I think this is a cool spot to kind of transition because you talk about programmatic focus, and this is an organization. So I watched the gala video from, I believe it was December of last year, 2019, and over 1 million people have Tourette syndrome or a tic disorder. 1 million people, and half of those are undiagnosed. And you also made a comment that in the past it would take somebody 10 years to actually get a diagnosis, and that's been decreased down to 2 years. So that's a significant decrease. And that was from your introduction speech at last year's gala. So maybe we could talk now specifically about the organization, the people you're serving, and then that programmatic focus, what really is important to the constituents you serve and their families, or you serve those families as well. I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, so I mean, everything that you said is true. There are 1 million people in the United States, and just to give you, a sense of the scope, cystic fibrosis, which is very familiar and a fabulous organization serving that community. There's 40,000 people impacted by that condition. So we have 1 million people nationally living with Tourette syndrome or tic disorder, and 500,000 of them have yet to receive a diagnosis, may not even know that they have it. So, what our organization does now and what it's always done is focus on that community and what it needs. So our mission is a 3-pillared mission. We provide broad reaching awareness about what Tourette syndrome is, and probably more importantly, what it's not, to the public. And we raise awareness for the organization and the resources that we have available to those who need us. Our second pillar is support. So we provide in-community support through a national network of chapters and support groups. We have about 32 chapters and over 90 support groups throughout the country, all for the purposes of, being that person that catches the midnight call when a family is in crisis, and to really provide that boots on the ground support day to day in the community, something that we can't do from our office in Bayside, Queens. And then our third pillar is research. We provide seed funding to researchers who want to explore further the mechanisms that cause Tourette syndrome and tic disorders, explore potential treatments and therapies for it. There is no cure for Tourette syndrome. So I think, our goal is really to continuously push to gather as much possible information about the condition as we can. So living with it will be that much easier and not nearly as disruptive as it can be. So that's really what we do. And Again, we do it throughout the country. We do it on, as far as national organizations are concerned, we do it on a pretty slim budget, which is thanks in large part due to the network of volunteers that we have across the country who really give of their time and their personal knowledge to help others.
So awareness, support, and research. What is the deliverable from a perspective of programming, aside from educating society as a whole? And talk, if you could, about the support for the individuals affected by this and their families. What sort of programs? You have these 90 support groups and 32 chapters nationally.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk to me a little bit about what it looks like in the trenches, so to speak, across the country? What sort of services are being provided? What sort of programming is being provided?
Yeah, so across the country, some of the programs that we offer, chapters will often run support groups, which, are not always therapeutic in nature, right? They're not always geared to, a place where you're talking all day about Tourette syndrome. At times there are social gatherings, the connectivity, right? There are people in this country who live in areas where they don't know a single other person with Tourette syndrome. So a lot of our chapters host support groups and other kinds of events to bring individuals living with this together, where they can get to know one another and they can really realize that they're part of a community, right? And feel that they're part of a community. We also provide in-services in schools. Oftentimes teachers, principals, school psychologists, school nurses, not always familiar with Tourette syndrome and what it looks like. Again, don't necessarily know what it is versus what it isn't, what the media tells us, right? Only 10% of people living with Tourette syndrome have coprolalia, which is what is most commonly thought of when you say Tourette syndrome, the cursing disorder, right? Or copropraxia, where you have these involuntary, uncontrollable, vulgar movements repeatedly, right? That's not what I'll say the norm. That's not the most common symptom in Tourette syndrome, but that's what the general public thinks about the most. So it's a lot more nuanced than that. And it's really a spectrum. It's a lifelong condition that waxes and it wanes depending on time of life. And it always manifests in early childhood. So, tics are usually noticed, and diagnosis usually happens between the ages of 5 and 8 years old. So, in school work and going into schools and explaining to teachers, why Johnny can't sit still. It's not because he doesn't want to listen to you. It's because he physically can't sit still. It's a neurological condition that causes him to do that. That's been a really integral program that this organization has always run. And we do run it out of national, and then the chapters also will provide that service locally. We have our Youth Ambassador Program and our Rising Leaders Program. So these programs, the Rising Leader Program is new as of last year. Our Youth Ambassador Program has been around for over a decade, probably over 15 years at this point. And those programs are really their competitive application process geared at recruiting kids who are living with Tourette syndrome, either themselves or perhaps a sibling has it or their parent has it. And we bring them together in a group to really learn everything that there is to know about the condition, learn how to talk about it, how to tell their personal story. We send them to Capitol Hill every March to talk to their representatives and their Congress people. And it's all with the aim that once the training concludes, they go home and they are the Tourette Association of America ambassadors in their community. And their charge is to continue sharing out our message to build compassion and understanding for those living with the condition. And the Rising Leaders, they're a group between 18 and 25, again, a competitive application process. And they're really charged to do the same, to really be the future of the organization and and to really put a face to a condition that so often is faceless.
So one of the things you mentioned there, which stands out to me, and having four of my own children has certainly made me much more sensitive to the way schools might not at occasion be as compassionate as possible, and just as a human race sometimes we're not as compassionate as we should be, I think, in a lot of ways.
Right.
From your gala video, or from your speech at the gala last year, um, the theme that I kept hearing was not alone. So you're not alone in just understanding or diagnosing the syndrome. You're not alone. Um, I think that's critical as a society, that we can be there for each other generally, but then even when a family is working through something like a child or an individual with Tourette syndrome, talk about the compassion, if you could, and how important that's proven out to be for some families. Maybe even some case studies that of a big challenge that a family was going through, and once they're surrounded with peers who are having the same sort of challenges, maybe how that had catapulted somebody in their own way, even if it's, one of the youth ambassadors, or somebody from the Rising Leader program. Maybe we could just talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's no shortage of stories in the Tourette community of people who, as a child, developed their symptoms and, immediately, thanks to their caregivers, were just, brought into a community of supporters, not even necessarily people living with Tourette syndrome, but just, a community of people who accepted them for who they were and, fought tirelessly to get them the tools that they needed to, live a successful life. I think there's no shortage of that. I just read a story the other day, which you can actually find on all of our social media outlets, of a young man who is a golfer, and he's an amazing golfer, and under any other circumstances, probably would have gotten countless scholarships to a college for golf. He was offered one scholarship, and the whole article is about how the community around him believes that it's because of his Tourette syndrome, because he does have coprolalia, he does have copropraxia, he does have these very visible, severe symptoms that are not socially appropriate. So therefore, while he has this amazing talent and this amazing skill, people are passing on him because they don't want to deal with it. Or the young lady in, Oklahoma, who last year went to go see a screening of Avengers Endgame and was kicked out of the movie theater during previews because her tics were too loud. But these are young people. You look at their stories and you read their stories, and the common theme in them being able to take those moments, accept them, and move forward is the people that they're surrounded by. People around them that recognize that this is just a piece of who they are, and it's no different than any other condition. It's more visible to the world in some cases, and it's harder to hide. And even when explained, not everybody wants to accept it as the answer. So, I think that's, from an organizational perspective, at the highest of levels, that's what we're always striving for. We're always striving to communicate out that, hey, this is really, first of all, a lot more people than you realize have it. There are people in your community, there are people that you're friends with who are dealing with this right now, and you probably have no idea about it because it's not the thing people talk about. But beyond that, when you do see a child in a restaurant, and they're stomping their feet or they're banging on the table, don't automatically rush to judge the parents and think that this is a discipline issue. It might not be a discipline issue. It could be Tourette syndrome. And the child might be just having a hard time managing their tics. Maybe it was a stressful day, whatever the case may be. So I think at the highest of levels, I would really like to see Tourette syndrome live squarely in the public consciousness, in a way where people are not jumping to the negative conclusion, that they're stopping for a second and they're saying, oh, well, maybe there's something going on there. Maybe that parent needs something. Maybe I should ask the question instead of assuming that my coworker in the cube next to me is constantly sniffling and clearing his throat just to annoy me, or because he needs a tissue, or because he hasn't gone to the doctor, or he refuses to stay home when he's sick. Let me ask him. Let me have a conversation with him and say, hey, I notice that you do this a lot. Or, is everything okay? Is there, ask the question, and you'll get an answer. Sorry.
Oh, it's all good.
Again, the working from home thing, listen, you never know who's going to pop in the frame.
It is May 26th, 2020, and this is the new world we live in.
Yes.
I will be honest with you. I've been muted for a little while because there's certainly some construction. I think they might be ripping up the street down the road here. And on the attic door, it was getting hammered on for about 5 minutes before. And that was one of my small people trying to get up here. But
trying to break in.
They're trying to break in, but they're not coming through that door. It's locked. I think there's so much to what you're saying there. And part of what I want to do here is amplify the message of organizations and help get the word out. But because I'm a big mush, part of it is like, man, I just thought, like, I hope one day that we're past all this, not past, disorders and tic syndromes and developmental disabilities, but like we're past the fact of judgment, where we can just be like, maybe they're going through something there, and maybe it's not just that they're being rude while I'm here at, I'm not going to make any names, but whatever restaurant I'm sitting at, trying to eat my buffalo wings, like maybe that family's actually going through something there. And if we could just have that compassion, that's the part that I go back to is, I don't want to get on my soapbox, but I hope someday we're at that point where we just realize those are just other people going through some challenges, and we should try to help if we can, and mind our own business if we can't sometimes, and just kind of pay attention to your buffalo wings, and that's
yeah, because trust me, if it's bothering you, it's bothering them more.
No doubt, 100%. So this is the part of the show where I like to find out about what does the organization need? And that question, anytime I say it to a nonprofit leader, is going to go to the same thing, and don't say it. I know you need money. All organizations need money. We get it. The show is called Philanthopy and Phocus. I guess I got the idea when I was thinking about it, that I know everybody needs money. But aside from, your typical funders, and listen, I'm going to let you share all the information to connect with you. But aside from dollars, what does the Tourette Association of America actually need, from collaborative partners to exposure to whatever? You have this platform here with me today, so you tell us about it.
Yeah, I think we would really like, to be able to get in front of, in a more robust way, people who, have the power to change minds, right? Teachers, schools have the power to set a precedent around the way people look and children look at others around them, look at their peers, right? Corporations, people who work in HR, they have the power to bring people in who can educate and elevate the unseen to be seen, right? For individuals who are largely ignored. All of that is, I think, really integral. So our ability for people to hear from us and to talk to us, right? Like last week we did I did on Friday before the holiday weekend, I did a little talk to L'Oreal. And, when I first met with the gentleman, the senior vice president of HR, he said to us, well, I don't know anybody that has Tourette syndrome. I don't know anybody who works with us who has Tourette syndrome. Nobody's ever said anything about it. And I said, well, I guarantee you, if we do a lunch and learn, and I guarantee you, if you start sharing out TS resources to your employee community, I guarantee you people will start coming out of the woodwork. So sure enough, we have the call on Friday, and there were like 3 people, one of them a senior level person at the organization, who said, yeah, I know somebody who lives with this every day. So I think, I think I think our challenge from a messaging standpoint is always, how do you make Tourette syndrome tangible for people that don't think it's around them? Right? It's like anything else. How do you make people care about something that they don't think impacts them? And I think the easiest way to do that is to put the information in front of large groups of people so that people feel comfortable sharing, well, you know what, that actually does impact me. I had friends after I joined the TAA, friends, neighbors, who I had known for years. Soon as I joined the TAA, say, oh, well, my child has Tourette syndrome. I've known you for years. You've never said it once, right? Because it's not the thing that people talk about. It's not the sexy cause. It's not a sexy thing to attach oneself to. So what I would ask people to do is to realize that they're surrounded by a community of people every day who are really hiding in plain sight. So, give our organization the opportunity to teach you about what's right in front of you and you don't even know it. So this way we can see it, so we can shine some light on it. So I think really opening doors and, if somebody says to you they have Tourette syndrome, asking to understand that more and doing whatever it is you can, right? I think, if you're a secretary at a business, right, and you meet somebody in the street and you ask them, hey, can I ask why are you doing that thing? And they say, well, I have Tourette syndrome. If you're a secretary at that company, go back to your company, say, hey, I met this person and here was the experience and here was the moment. And, they shared that they had Tourette syndrome. And I very quickly realized, I don't know anything about this. Maybe this is something we should be talking about. Tell a friend. We have our fundraisers. Of course, I would love everybody to, sign up for our runs and attend our galas and all of that. But I think, even the smallest gesture to simply, when you learn about it or when you meet somebody living with it or when you have an opportunity to learn about it, take advantage of that opportunity and share it with 3 other people. That's really how it spreads like wildfire. That's really how the knowledge spreads. That's really how the compassion increases. Without that one person caring enough to share their story or to share another person's story about how it impacted them, then it's just, we're always in the shadows.
So that series where you do these lunch and learns with corporations, is that a program that you sort of own as the CEO? Is it someone on your team that owns that program? And how much more are you looking to get out and do those sort of educational sessions?
I think we'd like to get into every single business throughout the country, right? As far as I'm concerned, we're not doing our job until every single person living with Tourette syndrome has a diagnosis is getting the support that they need to live a better life. So that means we need to be in every single corner, under every single rock, in front of every single person throughout this country so that we can raise enough awareness so when people see it, they know what they're looking at.
So is that so obviously it is a passion play for you. Do you own that particular program, or is there someone on the team that does it? Or, how do we, let's say it this way. If an organization,
how do you reach out and learn
sure.
how you can, you can reach out to me.
Right to the top. We'll have Amanda's information will be at the end of the video, and then I'll share it in the comment section, and I'll let Amanda tell you what it is in a couple more minutes. So from a collaborative perspective, you and I know each other for a couple of years, and I sort of fancy myself this connector guy. I like to bring people together, the whole thing, right? 2 + 2 is some number much higher than 4, all this stuff that Tommy says sometimes. So I'm thinking of organizations right off the top of my head that I think there could be collaborative opportunities. How much has TAA done recently under your regime here as far as collaborating with other organizations? I'm guessing that there must be, other organizations that have connections to school systems or are doing lunch and learns to talk about other types of challenges that individuals go through would be good collaborators for you. But maybe you could speak to that and to the audience here, because they're going to be people who might know how to get connections that would be appropriate for both parties.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. A lot of what we've historically done has been reactionary, right? We have a limited bandwidth as a national organization. So, oftentimes what we do is we put out into the universe that there are these opportunities available, and people will request them. And a lot of it comes from our constituents, right? Our constituents are in a school and their child's having a rough time, so they call in a request for us to come in and educate. We've done a lot of work over the last couple of years with pharma, big pharma, because there were a number of clinical studies happening over the last couple of years. So we were a resource for them to really understand and connect with the community so they could, have a 360-degree viewpoint of what it's like to live with a condition that they're looking to invest resources into treating. Again, we've done a lot in 2 years, but we've really scratched the surface. There's so many other companies and organizations that I think we would be interested in partnering with. I really think the world is sort of our oyster. We're continuing to just communicate out what our mission is. We are a partner of a lot of member organizations like the National Health Council. They're doing some homework right next to me. So the National Health Council is a membership organization that has all of the major healthcare nonprofits, within its umbrella. We do a lot of our advocacy work in partnership with that member-based organization. There are other organizations like the International OCD Foundation and CHAD, which is for ADHD support. So those two organizations we do interact with from time to time to try to find points of collaboration, because 80% of individuals living with Tourette syndrome also have a co-occurring condition, most frequently OCD and ADHD. We've done a lot to really bolster our presence and our visibility, but I think we've only really scratched the surface. There's a lot more that we can do.
So what about in specifically with the autism community? Is there morbidity between the syndrome there and individuals with the autism spectrum disorder?
Yes, there is some overlap between autism and Tourette syndrome. Most often kids with autism will have tics. That's where the overlap is. But that's an area that is in need of more exploration.
Yeah, I have several connections to that community where I think there might be some value for your organization and some of these other organizations that we do work with. I'd like to explore that after our call, on a subsequent conversation to make some appropriate connections for you as well. Look, this is one of these deals where I feel where, and I was on the call with, we were doing an interview about 2 weeks ago with a friend of mine who is the executive director of Neighborhood Housing Services of Jamaica, Lori Miller, and she had said, we're sort of like this best kept secret, and they've been there for like some 40 years, and they're this, I don't know if you can hear that, but it sounds like somebody's trying to get up here again.
Someone's trying to break in.
It sounds too, and I always joke with you and say, look, I've done a lot of work in Bayside for a number of years. In fact, for a long time, I had an office in your building there in Bayside.
Yep.
And I say, it's interesting that a national nonprofit organization sits right there on Bell Boulevard and nobody knew. Somebody knew, but a lot of people didn't know. So this is an easy one, but you don't want to be a best kept secret, right? You want the word out there. So So I hope that opportunities like this help you get the word out there. And I want you to know that whatever I can do to help you get the word out there, I want to do as well. So let's transition real quick. It is, as I said earlier, May 26, 2020. The world is new. Events have changed. Galas have changed. I'm not even going to use the word that everybody's using these days, but what have you done to have to change these days to go in a different direction? I'm going to move around the word all the time, but I'm not going to say it. What have you had to do to take advantage of new opportunities?
For us, the biggest, not even in for us, the biggest change that we really had to mobilize as soon as, the world shut down was our national conference. Our national conference was scheduled to happen in Minneapolis, May 15th through 17th. So it's since passed, and we had 5 weeks to fully convert what was supposed to be an in-person conference where we were hoping to attract up to 500 people into a virtual event. So that was a big undertaking for us. I mean, we were able to do it. It proved very successful, but that's really what we're doing. We are trying to, sorry. We are really, I think, my strategy has always been, I don't think you should take any moment and make decisions based on a snapshot of a picture, right? Because there's always other things going on outside of the frame that you need to put into consideration. So we've really been measured in our approach to commuting in-person events to virtual events. We did have to move our national walk to a virtual format. So now, it's now a month-long initiative called Miles for Tourette, where we're asking people to participate virtually by biking and, walking their dog and running and, really logging those miles in any way that they can and seeking friends to sponsor them. We've postponed some events. We have a golf outing and a ladies' game day that typically happens in Chicago, Illinois. So golf has been postponed. The ladies' game day has been canceled. And now we look, towards our gala, which will be happening October 29th. And as of right now, I am reluctant to make any changes to that. We're going to watch, we're going to wait, we're going to see what happens. A lot of the world is indeed starting to open up again. So I'm just kind of holding on to hope that things will be quote unquote normal by the time we get to October. That's really my hope. And if we can't, then we'll change it to a virtual event. And I think we'll still be successful. But that's, I think jumping to judgment or frankly really listening to anybody that speaks right now is a mistake. I think, everybody is, there's so many differing messages. Even the CDC, who we have tremendous respect for because we are cooperative partners with them to deliver Tourette education, even, they are sending out information one day that is different from information they send out at a later date. So I think we, all nonprofits, I think now is not the time to freak out. I think now is the time to really hunker down and talk to donors and reach out to them and not only donors, but just people who you serve, just to check in and say, hey, like, how are you holding up? How's everything doing? Like, are you all right? Is there anything we can do for you? Are there any resources you need? And not worry about the money. And I know that, a lot of people watching this are probably like, are you crazy? Like, how do you not worry about the money when you're a nonprofit, right? That's basically all we do. But the reality is money only comes if you are fulfilling your mission. Money only comes if you're making an impact. Money won't come if all you're ever worrying about is the money. We don't raise money for the sake of raising money. We raise money so that we can deliver on our mission. So, now is the time to, focus on the mission delivery piece to the best of your ability. And some organizations need money fast to do that. But those are the organizations that money will come to immediately to provide those services, like food banks and, nonprofits that are really right now, in desperate need of their services. But the rest of us, I think the rest of us need to realize that our constituents are being impacted by this. But we as an organization for the larger community may not be the priority. There may be other things happening in their life, food scarcity, housing concerns. So as long as organizationally you're there to support them in the best way you can, even if that's just a phone call to check in and say, hey, how are you doing? It's a really stressful time. Is there anything we can do for you, even if it's just having a 15-minute phone call and letting you vent to us about how stressed you are? That will be worth its weight in gold when things sort of level out. They'll remember those moments. They'll remember the nonprofit that just cared and was there for them when they needed them.
The money will come as you make an impact and as you're fulfilling your mission. I like that. I think it's critical. But I think, to your other point, you need to be in contact with folks. You need to be sharing your messaging. And, I've seen you do some of that through social media. What have you found? We have to always, as businesses, as organizations, have to sort of meet our clients and or donors and constituents, clients on the business side, and then donors and constituents on the nonprofit side, sort of where they are. And sort of how they consume information as well. What I'd love you to just hit on as we sort of draw to a close would be, what have you found from an organizational perspective has been the best way to reach out? Because I might consume information differently than my children certainly do, and differently than my parents certainly do, and all those different. So if you could speak to that, because we've talked about this offline, but just so other folks could hear it, how you've made that impact at multiple levels.
Well, we immediately orchestrated a call campaign. So the entire staff began calling people at the beginning of all this, just to check in and sort of see how they were faring. So, that I think has been really important and well received. Additionally, because of our community and their experiences with anxiety and other conditions that overlay with Tourette syndrome, we made sure to ramp up our COVID programming. So we did a series of webinars. Some were, dealing with anxiety in light of COVID, homeschooling during COVID. We've had a lot of different webinars, but I think the thing that we did at the very beginning of all this that we can really see, how quickly and how important it was to do it was, we have an I Have TS card. So if you go to our website, you can download this card. I Have TS card, and it talks about how, it's a condition, I can't control it, I have tics, right? And it's fairly generic. But once COVID started, we started hearing from the community, those that have sniffling tics, coughing tics, that when they were out and about, people were telling them, well, you should be wearing a mask. Like, are you sick? I don't want to sit next to you on the airplane because she's caught, and that happened to a young lady. She was on an airplane in the middle of March heading home. And people asked to be moved, their seats moved away from her, even after she told them, I have Tourette syndrome. I am not sick. This is just my tic. This is just what I do. I always do it. So we made a COVID specific I Have TS card, and traffic to our webpage for that jumped 150%.
That's awesome.
And then all the other programming we did, we really saw a very quick rebound effect. Against the national average, our organization saw a far lesser dip in web page traffic and a much quicker recovery compared to other nonprofits and for-profits. And I really think that that's because we were doing this consistent telephone outreach. We were also sharing out information on all of our social media channels. And we were really responding in real time to feedback we were getting from the community about what they were experiencing.
I mean, isn't that it though? you're a resource for the folks that you're serving, and you moved fast and you found out what was needed and you made sure that these individuals got that. I'm curious, and I have to ask this. I mean, to do these videos and programming and stuff, was it as simple as what we're doing here on a Zoom when you're doing the programming about homeschooling, for example, or do you guys have like a tricked out studio at the office somewhere like that? You just kind of, no. So was it as simple as like this kind of deal, like on Zoom?
As simple as this and a screen share.
That's it. Yeah. Nothing's a big deal, right? We can make this stuff happen pretty easily. So on one of my other monitors here, it says Miles for Tourette Run, Walk, Cycle, May 15th through June 15th, teamtourette.org. That's how somebody can get involved in Miles for Tourette. To check out the organization as a whole, what is the website, Amanda?
Tourette.org.
Tourette.org.
Yep, TOURETTE.org.
.org. What do you want people to know in the final minute or so here that maybe we didn't cover? And if we covered it all, I'm thrilled, but I'm sure there's something you want to leave everybody with to just kind of remember.
I mean, I think the thing I want everybody to remember and take away from this is that there's somebody in your life right now living with this. There's somebody on your kid's baseball team. There's somebody that you work with. There's a neighbor. Somebody in your close circle is living with this and is dealing with this on a day-to-day basis. So don't think that this isn't impacting you, and don't think that you can't be part of the solution to really generate awareness and compassion for those living with it. Not everybody living with it. Not every day is hard for those who live with it. Not every day are they having severe tics. But there are hard days, and I think the more that we let the folks in our community know that we're willing to learn, the better off we'll all be.
I think that's so well said, and I'm super happy to have had you come on the show today. I think it's so great. The reality that we're all going through is you had some visitors and some extra noise. I had some visitors, or they attempted to be visitors, although I wasn't getting up to let them in. It's a trying time in our history right now, but organizations like yours are always on the front lines, helping those who need the help. And the biggest piece I take away from our conversation today is that we need to be aware and we need to be compassionate for each other. And that's really where I would like to leave this conversation. If they want to reach out to you, they can find you through Tourette.org and kind of track you down personally, and you'll help them, whether it be somebody who needs some help or rather those who want to donate and be helpful. You'll help navigate them through your organization as appropriate, correct?
Absolutely.
So thank you for being here, everybody. Thank you for watching. Thanks for plugging in. I am your buddy, Tommy D, coming to you again from the attic. Amanda, thanks for being here. This has been Philanthropy.
Tommy.
You're welcome. This has been Philanthropy in Focus. Check us out on YouTube. You can always reach out to me with some questions through the chats and different things, but you'll have all my contact info if you watch the video. Thanks again. Have an incredible day, everybody. I will talk to you soon. Take care. Thanks, Amanda. Bye.
Bye.